essentially, all we do every day is debate this shit, and it really is just a debate topic. I don't think none of us take this shit seriously.
Do you have an actual way to address the question, Branch, or are you going to use general obfuscation? Because we were talking about how fast the sun was going over Capricorn. Do you have a way to address that, or just going to make a general topic that has something to do with the discussion?
He tried to get away from it because he thinks horizontal bends.
What are you talking about? What's your evidence that the sun travels faster on the Tropic of Capricorn than it does?
The reports that robots and when they say dusk arrives sooner in the south than the north, and the analemma where the bottom loop of the analemma is bigger than the top. Also, the longest day in the north is longer than the longest day in the south. The shortest day in the north is still longer than the shortest day in the south. So that shows totally different activity, totally different weather.
What are you talking about? What's your evidence that the longest day in the south is longer than the longest day in the north? That would be at the North Pole and the South Pole.
In the 1800s with their testimony.
Jesus. Yeah, the only reason why, if you're talking about if you're saying outside of Antarctica, that's just because the most southern point of the southern hemisphere doesn't go as far south as it does in the northern hemisphere.
So compare the longest day in the northern hemisphere versus the longest day in the southern hemisphere. Compare the
unless you go to Antarctica. Unless you go to Antarctica. But in Antarctica, you get you still get roughly 6 months of daytime. What are you talking about?
Antarctica has refracted light. The sun's far away. The rest of the photos look.
That's why it goes around you in a circle, right? That's why it goes around you in a circle.
We would need to see actual trustworthy footage.
How does it go around you in a circle?
And we don't appear to have that.
You can go visit it yourself. Tens of thousands of people have. It's like $20,000 to take a cruise down there. Okay, tens of thousands of people have done it.
Refracted light, probably refracted off of the dome or refracted far away.
Oh my God, it's so fake. It's all fake.
Yeah, you can see the way the shadows play in the deceptive imagery, or they'll do like a circular edit where it looks like they just put the editing together in a loop. Like in that one photo where it's over what looks like a dock.
We've had this conversation before many times, woman. I'd like to.
Ridiculous.
I'd like to hear from the other flat earthers in here for a change.
I decided to become a flat earther all of a sudden. So,
welcome, Branch.
I'd like to see the theory of evolution. Somebody show me that.
But these are the main issues that the globe can't really deal with, so it's good just to state where we are.
Can't deal with what?
We disagree. The questionable photo editing, the diffracted light, the fact that the longer days are in the north generally, like the sun's kind of hanging around there a bit longer, like it's hovering over the land a bit longer in the north and the south, that sort of stuff.
I'm still waiting for this evidence of a globe. It's supposed to be
evidence of what?
We're never going to see no evidence of the globe because it's just not there.
Sort just said in chat that horizontal bending is knowledge.
Yeah, horizontal bending. What the hell does that even mean?
Makes no sense.
Doesn't make sense at all. Horizontal bending.
To believe in the globe branch, you have to
goes against what horizontal is.
It defeats the purpose of being horizontal if it bends.
You have to believe in metaphysics to even believe in the globe. You have to believe in this disconnect between reality and whatever you're trying to prove, and use a bunch of metaphysical, assumption and stuff.
Exactly.
Santa Maria.
Will you give me an example of one of these metaphysical assumptions, Lemonbird? Just one example.
That the gas is a gravity ball that pulls inward when we know that bodies of heat expand outward. You have to believe in metaphysics to believe that an expansive body of heat, which normally goes outward, pulls inward due to gravity. That's metaphysics. You have to believe that gravity is still pulling down everything, despite the fact that we see helium go up and away and out. You have to believe that there's this core of gravity pulling everything to the center, despite the fact that we don't see this. We just, philosophically assume it. It's just metaphysics. It's this ball being.
Well, why does helium accumulate at the bottom of a container? When you pull a vacuum on a container and then you introduce helium, why does it pull at the bottom of the container so that you can weigh the helium?
It becomes metaphysics when you assume that it pulls to the center of a ball when we don't see evidence of that.
Yeah, so helium does not escape gravity, okay? It settles to the bottom of a container. You get a pressure gradient in the container. That's what allows you to weigh it.
And the container's the firmament.
Look, if you take all gas away in a vacuum, the helium's going to be denser than the gas that's not there.
Yeah,
anymore.
Jake.
Although
the container's the firmament.
Right, but the question is, why is it heavier at the bottom? Why does more of it settle at the bottom of the container than the top? If it defies gravity, it should settle at the top of the container, not at the bottom.
I'm sorry,
If it's
Jake.
helium, then it does.
It sounds to me like you're making excuses, Jake.
I feel like he's making it up.
What do you mean? Are you saying you can't weigh helium? You can't weigh a container with helium in it?
No, that's the container. Show us that the helium is layered at the bottom.
It would have to be in order for you to be able to weigh it. Otherwise, it wouldn't exert a force on the scale.
To weigh helium, you just put it inside a container and then weigh the container. You can't weigh helium alone.
Yeah, but think about it. For it to add any weight to the container, the pressure has to push on the walls of the container in an uneven way. Otherwise, there would be no change in weight.
Listen, fill up a vacuum chamber, have the helium layered at the bottom, and then have the nozzle at the bottom, so someone sucks in that helium and his voice changes. Okay?
You don't even have to. You don't have to pull a vacuum. You could just take an empty container that has regular air in it and fill it with helium, and it's going to weigh more. The container will weigh more.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the helium layering at the bottom.
Huh?
You said the helium would go to the bottom of this vacuum.
Well, it would go. If you filled it with air, the helium would be above the air, but it would still be pushing down more than it pushes up, which is why you're able to weigh the helium. If you pull it, it's going to be displaced. If you have regular air in there, the air will displace the helium because it's denser. It's going to go to the bottom of the container, but the helium is still pushing harder on the bottom than the top of the container, which is why the container will become heavier when you fill it with helium.
And that's why.
Sounds like a belief.
Maybe it's just adding in.
It's not a belief. It's a fact. People buy and sell helium every day. Are you telling me you can't weigh helium? Give me a break.
That's why
you're making claims that you can't prove.
That's why helium balloons.
I can't prove that people buy and sell helium every day by weight. Just go to your local balloon shop.
Right. You think a canister of an empty canister is heavier than a full canister of helium?
Well, the thing is, they show a balloon
That's
filled
the
with
fucking
helium.
question.
Well, restate the question.
Just answer the question. Just yes or no. Is an empty canister heavier than a full canister of helium?
It is heavier, yes.
Yo, real quick, mic check. Can you guys hear me?
So going back to the vacuum, Chris, when you fill a balloon of helium and then put it in a vacuum, it sinks to the bottom. But it may be a fallacy of composition, Chris, to say that a balloon filled with helium goes to the bottom when the helium outside of the balloon may potentially rise to the top of the vacuum. We need to see if the helium itself is rising to the top of the vacuum without the balloon.
Did you guys just say that the container is lighter when the helium's inside?
Percentage.
What's up?
Oh, my mic does work. All right, I was wondering, am I low or something?
Everybody's ignoring you.
You guys are just ignoring me. All right.
No, you're cool, man. But yeah, did I just hear Chris and Jake say that the container would be lighter after?
Well, Chris, if you think about this, you can attach a stone to somebody.
The container would be lighter after. Yes, the container would be lighter after all the helium is expended.
Yeah, attach a stone to a feather, it'll sink. Attach a stone to helium, and it'll sink too. So, Chris, we need to see if the helium itself interacts by rising or sinking without being bogged down by the stone of the container. That's the point.
Your disruption.
This whole
negative.
All right, let's say you have an empty container, right? You have a tank, like a gas tank, and you introduce helium in it, and this is in just the surface of Earth, with air. You introduce helium into it. Is the container going to be lighter now that the helium's in it or not?
The container will be heavier.
But if helium is always going up in air, shouldn't it be lighter?
No.
Helium is still moving
Only
up
if it's
in all
only
directions.
if it's within only if it's surrounded by a less dense medium.
But wouldn't it be because the container's in air?
Yeah, but gas isn't bonded, so gas is gonna move all over. So it's gonna move up.
No, they're still going to create a gradient. That's how they're able to exert a weight.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
But the gas will still produce a gradient, and helium will produce a gradient with the densest part of the helium at the bottom of the container and the lightest at the top, which is why you're able to weigh it in a container. Otherwise, the container would be lighter when you add the helium, and it's not. It's heavier.
Hold up. But a balloon goes up
it's
in
heavier.
air, right? A helium balloon
Helium
goes
has
up in
weight.
air because the helium is lighter than the air, right?
Right.
So if it goes up in air and then you slowly turn it into a vacuum, and because of the weight of the balloon, it goes down. How come?
Yeah, you don't need a vacuum. You
with
just
the
need to
gas
get that. You just need to get the air around it to be the same density as the helium, and it will go
But
down.
how come you wouldn't expect the same thing with a gas tank?
What do you mean?
Okay, so obviously this balloon that's going up, it's weighing less because it's going up, right? It's not weighing anything. It's
Jake, look.
The force
Look
would
at
be in the
the
opposite direction.
reason why the helium balloon goes up in atmosphere. It doesn't have that to force the helium up in the tank. Puckunage is being a douche.
Well, the thing is, I can attach a stone to a person, to a feather, or to helium, and it'll go down. So we need to see if the helium itself is actually going down, or if it's just the container.
No, hold up. What's the difference?
If you have a container full of air and you start introducing helium into it, the air will displace the helium, and the air would be at the more of the air would be at the bottom, and more of the helium would be at the top. But they would still both be pushing down on the container more than they're pushing up, which is why the container would get heavier as you add the helium to it, not lighter.
Okay, what's the difference between the gas tank and the balloon? Aren't they both containers?
Yeah. Remember, the helium's
isn't
still moving
a
in all
balloon
directions.
a container that does not allow the gas to escape?
Gas does escape a balloon, by the way, just very slowly.
We need to see if it's just the container generating its own forces and going downward, irrespective of the helium going down too, or if the helium is actually going down and adding weight. It appears to be a bit of a fallacy to believe that helium, which normally doesn't press down on the weight of the scale or whatever, is all of a sudden going to do that when it's put inside of another container. That's a bit of a fallacy.
Lemon, try to be part of the conversation, not an obstacle to it.
The truth is, it's because of the nature of the container. So the balloon is an elastic container. It will expand, and so the helium will be less dense.
It's a combined weight of the. It's not.
Tank
It's because of the weight of the balloon.
So the helium will be more dense after it's put in there.
No, it's because of the weight of the balloon and the helium together are lighter than the surrounding air. But the weight of a metal canister, for example,
of the surrounding volume of air, the equivalent volume of air, it's lighter. The balloon and the helium is lighter than the equivalent volume that it displaces of air. That's when you determine whether it's going to be buoyant or it's going to sink.
Obviously, but I'm saying the reason why you don't expect the helium tank to weigh lighter after injecting the helium in, just like you do with the balloon, because there's the buoyancy to it, is because you're not letting the helium expand in that tank, whereas you are with the balloon. So you're letting the helium be less dense than the surrounding air with the balloon, but not with the gas tank. If you were allowing for the expansion of the helium in the gas tank, then you would also see that there's more of a buoyant force, and the weight of the tank would be less.
But it's like you guys are saying,
it's not
helium
saying
doesn't
anything.
have any weight. I mean, you're adding more of substance into the tank, so obviously it's going to get heavier. It doesn't matter what you put in. You're adding more something.
Right. Well, Flatzoid, unlike the other flat earthers in here, they think that helium has an anti-weight property and that helium doesn't have weight.
Everything has weight.
Helium in its natural form, if you allow for it to expand, is less dense, but you're not letting that happen in a gas tank. So of course it's going to be heavier.
Bob Nodell said that NASA rockets are filled with helium.
So
that's why they go up.
So percent, if you imagine you have a gigantic room and you evacuate all the air out of it, you pull a vacuum in it, and you start introducing helium into that vacuum. Does the helium accumulate near the ceiling, or where it's free to expand, or does it accumulate near the floor?
See, if we were, I'm not sure where we can even get.
Imagine if you could create a vacuum chamber the size of a stadium, okay?
Yeah,
and then we just release
the vacuum.
And then, well, imagine if we make the most perfect vacuum that we can in this gigantic stadium, and then we release the amount of helium that's in a small balloon in this chamber. Does that helium, which is free to expand in all directions, does it go to the ceiling, or does more of it go to the floor?
I think it would equalize in that vacuum chamber, and it would stop being a perfect vacuum. It would now be a near perfect vacuum.
Right, it would stop being a near perfect vacuum, but that doesn't answer the question. Does more of the helium go to the ceiling, or more of it go to the floor?
I think it would equalize in all directions.
So you wouldn't be able to weigh it then. It would be the same. If you could weigh the whole stadium, it would weigh the same amount, since it's pushing equally on both the roof and the floor.
Yeah, as long as you're letting the gas expand, then I don't see why not.
Okay, so there's circumstances where we're not able to weigh
Jeremy's
helium.
Trying to get
what you're saying.
What are you trying to say, Jeremy?
Mike low.
You're a little bit low, but we can hear you. Go ahead.
Jake, does gas move randomly in all directions?
According to the scale, not equally in all directions.
It's too late, though.
Not within a gravitational field.
That's the end.
More of them. If you were to track the vectors,
random that you claim.
Right. If you track the vectors of all the molecules within a gravitational field, more of them are moving down than they are moving sideways.
But the thing is, this is too late.
Mainstream science has said gas is moving randomly in all directions. Where would they have tested that out to know?
Is it equal?
Happens? If it's
no, it's not equal. It's not equal.
If there's always a downward bias, where would they have went to see gas moving randomly in all directions?
Equal, Jeremy.
The only way they weigh it is with a rigid container, one that doesn't allow the gas to expand and be its true light form. It's low density form.
These guys are science deniers. They don't believe gas moves randomly in all directions.
I mean, you can weigh gas in an open container if it's denser than the air that's in there.
The helium doesn't stop moving just because you've vacuumed the container. It's still going to be moving all over. Just you're asserting that it's at the bottom just because it weighs more is now it's a belief.
No, it's moving towards the bottom more than it's moving towards the top. That's why you're able to weigh it.
They're science deniers, Flatzoid.
Yeah, the fact that you're able to weigh gas proves that. Otherwise, if it's exerting an equal force upward as it is downward, then the container would be lighter with the gas in it, or it would be the same weight.
Now you're ignoring physics.
This is not an argument at this point. This is a game.
The same as what you put it in
this is nothing but a bad game.
Here's the question,
the thing is, Jake, on a plane, normally helium doesn't exert any sort of force at all. It just dissipates. So it's a bit of a fallacy, don't you think?
What are you talking about? Helium is bought and sold every day in a container by weight. What are you talking about? It doesn't exert a force.
Unless it's inside of another solid structure. Or in
tons of helium are bought and sold every day by weight, by weighing it in a container. So it's exerting a force on the bottom of that container.
Normally, helium doesn't exert a force at all.
Jake, if it's so, let's say you have this balloon in a vacuum chamber, right? And it has helium in it.
Percent, I'm not talking to you, bro. You're just a fake flat earther. You don't even believe the things you say, so you're not worth talking to.
You're saying that
so anything that you ask me, I'm no longer. You and I are done. I'm not engaging you any further.
Fine,
you and I are done.
Room. Forget you. So let's say you have this balloon in a vacuum chamber, and the chamber initially it's atmospherized, right? And then you turn on the vacuum, and it's slowly pumping out this air, and the helium balloon, instead of floating, drops. Right? That's what you would expect would happen. Now the question is this happening because the helium, the vacuum's reached such a critical point, like a threshold, wherein the helium's mass is weighing it downwards, or is it because you've pumped out enough of this atmosphere that the weight of the balloon is what's making it go down? So
does anybody else in here wish to argue with people that are confused by up and down?
No, hold up. So to test this, you would have two different size balloons, two different masses of balloons, and put in the same amount of helium, and see which one falls faster. If it's due to the vacuum reaching a critical point and all helium going down, then they should go down at the same time. If one goes down before the other, that means it's due to the mass of the balloon.
What is down, Jeremy?
It's what your girl is every night when I come back.
We don't need to see the difference.
It's toward the earth. The thing is, it's an assumption that we have pushing and pulling forces with the helium all of a sudden pushing downward. That may be a little off.
Stop talking just because he started talking over you, Jeremy.
Yeah, we don't need a theory or to hypothesize on like what up or down is. That's just nonsense. Up is up and down is down.
And the thing is,
we don't need a theory on up.
Anything about it. It's
you don't
cute
need a
how
theory on
pitiful
up.
and pathetic that is.
You don't need a theory of general relativity on down, on which way
This
down
isn't a theory. We're just talking about a general basic understanding.
Up is straight above your head, down is straight into the ground.
You don't know which way is up.
We don't need an up theory.
We do know what up is. You observe it every day.
Good movie.
Less dense goes up.
Jeremy
more
doesn't.
dense
He's confusing them all the time.
Make a plumb line. Go 90 degrees from perpendicular, from horizontal, and you'll have your up. It's pretty simple. That's which way up is.
Going straight.
Which direction along that axis is up?
Which direction?
And up relative to what? That's one part that you'll never get is how up is relative.
To the horizontal we made, perpendicular from vertical. From vertical, yeah.
Up toward the sky, down toward the ground.
Over the curve. Something can go down over the curve.
You make a horizontal line.
At the same level without going down relative to the center of the earth, but it can go down relative to that origin horizontal.
Sure, you guys got a crazy theory of which way up and down is. I know.
Would you agree with up and
crazy
down?
About it.
That's your up and down theory.
With altitude.
We observe it and measure it.
So up becomes down if you go far enough over the ball.
Where's my
because the same direction that was up before becomes down on the other side of the globe.
Lemon, up is away from the surface. Everywhere, up is away from the surface of the earth.
Yeah, that's what you've got to do with altitude.
Toward the sky would be up, toward the ground would be down.
I mean, if you can't be honest with yourself to say, look, altitude has got to do with up and down, then I don't know. I don't care who you are, if you're flat earther, if you're...
We're not confused by that. We're not confused by that.
We need to show how it's up over a ball or up over a flat plane. And we need an absolute standard for that, so the globe doesn't have an absolute standard to compare curvature against.
I'd like Flatzoid to answer the question, what creates the pressure gradient on the flat Earth?
It's a dynamic system.
What does that mean?
It means it's always changing.
Right, but
I mean,
but why is it always changing in a way that the densest? Why is it always changing in the way that the densest part of the atmosphere is at the bottom and the thinnest part is at the top, furthest from the surface?
That's where do you think that gas comes from? Does it come from the surface or does it come?
Oh, I knew you would say that. You gave me the standard quantum eraser answer. The easy debunk of this is in that experiment where you take a vacuum chamber. If you take a vacuum chamber and you draw a vacuum on, or you take a container and you draw a vacuum on it, and then you slowly introduce helium from any location on the container, from the bottom, from the top, that helium will accumulate at the bottom.
Great.
And create a pressure gradient in that container. Even though you introduce the helium at the top of the container, it will still accumulate at the bottom, which is why the container will register a weight, which is why you're able to weigh helium.
Hang on. Show us that. Show us this. Hold on, Flatzoid. Show us this vacuum with only helium in it, with their gradient being down. Let's see it. Go.
The fact that you could weigh it, the fact that the container would weigh more, the fact that the container would weigh more than the helium, and like we said, helium is bought and sold every day. This is I don't need to demonstrate for you the fact that helium is bought and sold every day by weight.
We know. You don't need to demonstrate your claim, no doubt.
But you kept talking, so you never allow him to even attempt to answer you. You ask him a question.
I don't need an answer, Jose. I don't need an answer.
We know that this is true. We know that this is true because helium is bought and sold every day by weight. Why do you need a demonstration?
His words don't do anything. We need to see the pressure gradient. Let's see it.
Jeremy, don't be plummy weak and talk over all the responses, Jeremy.
We don't need to hear any responses. It's time for him to put his evidence up.
The evidence, I just told you, Jeremy, the evidence is that it's bought and sold every day by weight, which proves that it's...
So you can't show us the pressure.
Because if what he's saying is true, then all the people selling helium could just fill the containers from the top. That way it will accumulate to the top of the container and make the container lighter.
The only reason it weighs is because it's a rigid container, so it's not letting it expand. So its density is high.
What's new? Jeremy can't understand something.
No, they can't show us the gradient. That's why Kosho and Moyak were going to do that experiment to prove that it is a gradient, but they can't prove it.
Speak
That's
for
a
Jeremy.
Here's another example. Here's another example.
Made a baseless claim. He also said horizontal.
I can take. Hold on a second.
Are you going to speak?
Here's the other.
Jake?
Hold on.
How much bullshit are you going to speak?
Jeremy, stop, please. I was talking. Please let me finish my conversation with Flatzoid. Okay. He said it's a dynamic system, and most of the air is produced near the ground, which is why it's denser near the ground. Okay. So we take that container with helium, and we flip it upside down. Guess what? It still weighs the same amount.
Because
the weight didn't change.
And you're limiting the volume.
Which means that the gas.
You're increasing the density. Quit being dense, man.
Jake can answer. Jake, you would
Go ahead,
understand that a container has a net weight of all the walls around. It's going to be the same no matter what you turn around. The gas is exerted on all the walls of the container. So it doesn't matter if you turn upside down, it's still going to be the same weight.
Wait. Are you making the claim? Are you?
You were making the
Are you making the claim that? Hold on a second. Are you making the claim that the gas is pushing on the floor just as the same amount of pressure as it's pushing on the ceiling of the container? Is that the claim that you're making? It's pushing the same amount?
It's the same. If you have a container and you fill it with gas, it's going to fill the container.
Right, and you're saying it's going to push the ceiling of the container just as hard as it pushes the floor.
Same as the side, everywhere.
So then why does it weigh more? If that's true, the container would weigh the same.
Volume, so you're increasing the density.
How does it exert a force? Well, look. We know that gases are individual molecules that are flying around, and they exert a force on the walls of the container when that molecule impacts that wall of that container. That's when a force is exerted, correct?
Yeah.
Right? So if what you're saying is true, that container would not change in weight when you filled it with gas because it would be...
You're adding more density.
Adding
more density.
But how? But in order, okay, look, there's a pressure sensor in the container, right? It's usually like a load cell in a modern scale, okay? Which means that something has to be pressing on it, right? Which means if you add gas to a container and it weighs more, it means that load cell is being pressed on harder. Which means that the gas has to be pressing on the bottom of the container harder than it's pushing on the top, because the gases that are pushing on the top of the container are making the container lighter. They're reducing the force on that load cell. They're not increasing the force on that load cell.
This is a safe assumption to make because we have liquid helium. We have liquid helium which climbs out of its container like it's trying to push.
We're not talking about liquid helium, okay? We're not talking about
liquid helium.
To simplify this argument, we're not talking about cryogenic helium, okay?
Explosive force on the container that is registered as down in the direction of down. Also up, left, right, left as well.
Can everybody just hold on 1 second? Jake, I'm going to ask you a question, Jake. Who the fuck are you trying to portray this fact to?
Well, I was having.
Branch, we got
I'm having a conversation with Flatzoid. I'd appreciate
before we go off on one of your.
If you don't get someone in there to just obfuscate like you, Branch.
Pressure in all directions inside of the container.
Branch, you're just coming here to disrupt the conversation.
Okay.
Flatzoid, do you understand?
The reason I asked this is because look.
Can we get a moderator in here?
So much fucking negative feedback on it, even though I get what you're saying is right. I get what you're saying is correct.
Branch,
Jesus,
but 5 minutes ago he said, Branch,
nobody wants to fucking hear it. It's fucking ridiculous.
Okay, that's good to concern, to be concerned. Let's get back to the point. It could be explosive pressure on all sides of the container that's registered down on the scale.
No, because if there's equal forces on the top of the container by the gas, if the gas is exerting an impact and a force... Look, there has to be, for that scale to weigh more, there has to be an unbalanced force in that container when you add the gas in it. That's a fact. Because if it's pushing the same amount on the top, the weight would not change.
10 minutes.
Jesus Christ, Branch.
Jake, do you not realize they're not gonna?
If the moderator doesn't come in here and shut Branch up, I'm just gonna leave.
There are many people that get what you're trying to
okay, I'm just gonna leave here if Branch doesn't stop talking.
Seriously, you gotta get a mod.
Right, well,
Branch, I like you.
Jake.
I like you, Branch, but we're trying
Jake,
to have
you know what, Jake? You know what, Jake? You can keep trying to say the same thing, multiple times. If nobody fucking gets it, then there's no point saying it again.
We get what Jake is saying, Branch. We're just trying to deal with the point of explosive pressure versus just an exclusively downward pressure. That may be explosive pressure on all sides, especially if you look at liquid helium. It just climbs up the side of the tube like it's just sticking to the walls or something.
Well, you know what I heard? I heard Jake trying to explain one thing to you guys in one way, and he wouldn't stop doing it, right? He tried to explain
That's
to you
why we
one
don't
way.
get into concerned trolling, because it gets us away from the main topic.
Same shit.
It just gets us away from the main topic when we concern troll. So it could be explosive pressure on all sides of the container, not just down.
Lemon,
Right,
can I make my
mean,
point now?
he could have
is
done
there
it
a
in a
mod
very
in here?
simplistic
Seriously,
way, right?
There's no
like,
mods
like
in
you
there
know what?
right
You
now?
know, think about it this way.
Really?
Why don't we
Mods in
think
here, guys?
about pressure?
Jeremy, it doesn't look
as,
like it. You guys are just talking over us the whole time. I just want to give my.
I'm sorry, bro.
my
I was
answers
talking, man.
asking
You're over talking me right now.
Okay. Reason why
Do you have something very important to say?
is because
you was over talking me, bro.
Branch, the reason the container has more weight, doesn't matter where you put it in, is because he's adding denser gas. He's taken all the gas out. He has put in extra dense gas now. So you're adding weight. It doesn't matter where it's on the container. It's inside a closed container. It can hit on any side of the wall. You guys are saying that pressure
His point was
stronger than the weight
specifically
of the
about the
container.
gradient.
No.
His point, he did
It's
make
false.
a point of there's going to be some gas, right? That creates a mass, right? But his point was more about the gradient than about the mass. The fact that the bottom of the container,
that's my point. It doesn't make
at
it
the
gradient.
bottom of the container, as opposed to the top of the container, this made a fucking difference. The gas
He's saying
isn't
it's all going down.
uniformly
He's saying it's only at the
spread
bottom.
in the container.
He's saying it's only at the bottom, which is false. It's not only at the bottom of the container. You adding a dense.
I mean,
you adding
assuming
substance
the
into
bottom of
into-
the
you adding
container is
substance into
facing
container.
the
Branch,
direction of gravity.
Branch, you adding substance into the container is adding weight. What happens if you take a bottle and you fill it to the brim with water? You telling me that there's more weight on the bottom of the bottle, or is the whole bottle got that weight?
Jesus. That's a good point. I mean, the way that we're thinking about this is that it has to pull downward. It's a little off. I mean, especially if the helium expands in all directions, why would you believe that when helium goes up and out, it doesn't even just go exclusively down? That's a bit of a fallacy.
Did you hear what he just
I
asked?
don't think the helium's going
Did you hear it?
in all directions.
Okay,
Hold
can
on.
I answer the question? When you talk
Did
about
you hear the
liquids,
question?
when you talk about liquids, the bonds between the molecules of a
can you guys hear
liquid
me, or is my
are
mic
so
low?
much stronger.
Is my mic low, guys? Or?
Right? That
I hear
problem
you.
is you talk too much, Jeremy. You talk too much.
Yeah,
And when you
talking
say
right there, and
something,
then,
it's not really worth listening to, so people talk over you.
We can mod ourselves,
okay.
Burr. Thanks for the selective moderation.
No,
What were you
I'm just saying that's what's going on, Jeremy.
Thank you.
I'm not giving my opinion on anything.
But my mic.
Thank you for the selective moderation. What were you saying, Jeremy?
Your mic's fine. Lemon, do you want moderation? You can get moderation if you want moderation.
I can moderate myself. Thank you. Jeremy, what were you saying?
Apparently
I
not.
don't even remember at this point.
Then moderate yourself and quit begging for it.
But you understand what I've been trying to say? I'm not saying gas is liquid. I'm just saying that it exerts a force on all the container walls and it gives the same weight. So trying to make a belief saying it's going to the bottom is just a belief. You can't prove it.
Yeah, they don't think that the gas. They don't think the gas in the container is moving randomly in all directions, which is they're against mainstream
That's
science.
my point.
On that.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah, they're saying it's just
prove
the
that
bottom.
Can't prove that there is a pressure gradient inside the container. So let's, if you can, let's see a container with just helium in it, room temperature, top and bottom of the container. Let's see the pressure gradient more on the bottom.
You
The
can do it
scale
with
shows you that.
You can do a pressure gradient in a container, but the point is you can only have gas pressure with the container. So the whole argument anyway is flawed because they have to have containment to prove the gas.
So in order to weigh a discrete quantity of gas, you can't isolate that quantity of gas, is your claim, right?
Without the containment, yeah.
No,
You
your
need
your
containment
claim is
to be able to weigh
Right.
it.
So just
also
weigh
weigh
this
it.
much of it. Just weigh this much, but don't isolate it, don't contain it. Gotcha.
How are you going to weigh it?
Who's the next retard that wants to say something monumentally stupid? Any of you?
It without containment. That's true. It's physics. Try and weigh gas without containment, please. I'll be waiting for that.
Try to weigh water without
You're
containment.
complaining about stupid shit. Maybe that's because you're dumb.
It's not. It's debunking your globe. Straight. You
don't know what
argument
debunking
this time
means,
has
sir.
been you guys have been validating you need containment to have gas pressure.
This is debunking the globe, you say.
What do you think the pressure at the bottom of a fluid is?
Greater.
No. It's sorry. Maybe I wasn't clear on the question. What does the pressure at the bottom of a fluid come from?
Having a scale which only reads downward pressure as opposed to left, right, and up, maybe.
No.
Yeah, but fluid doesn't move. Fluid doesn't move in all directions. Gas moves in all directions, so it's.
Gases are fluid.
If you're trying to.
The pressure in a fluid is the weight of the column of fluid. Let me finish, and then you can respond. The pressure in a fluid is the weight of the fluid above you. And gases are fluid.
But the thing is, we need something that registers the pressure in all directions because gases go up, down, left, right, and down. But we only have a pressure
fluid, no.
downward.
Come on, Lemon. Fluid does also.
Gases have fluid tendencies, but gases are not liquids. Liquids and
They're
gases
not liquids,
are two different things.
but they're fluids.
Even though they're both seen as liquids,
Yeah, they flow.
both are seen as fluids. But fluids and liquids and gases are three different things. You can't say because gas acts like a fluid, it's a liquid. You understand?
Right, they're three different things. Fluid is a larger set that includes both gases and liquids.
Fluid just means that it flows like a liquid. It has a behavior that's very similar to liquids in that it flows, needs some level of containment, doesn't really take a shape, but it's not a liquid in that we can see it, attaining a liquid form that is constant. Gas appears to dissipate. Liquids don't tend to do that. They're contained.
Liquids are also fluid.
Yeah, you can see this with Schillian optics. Have you seen Have you done ever Schillian optics before?
Yep, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, you see, then it has a fluid tendency to act, but it still doesn't mean the gas is acting like a liquid. You'll still
Right, it's acting like it's not a liquid, it's a fluid.
Yeah, but you're saying a column of fluid.
Yeah.
Gas isn't bonded, so it can't have columns. It moves in all directions.
I'm not talking about how it moves. I'm just saying what's above you.
The less dense is above.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how dense it is. The pressure that you're measuring is the weight of all of the fluid above you.
If you have it in a container, yes.
Doesn't matter if it's in a container or not.
You have to weigh it. You have to have it. Okay, set your scale quickly down on the floor.
I'm not saying you weigh it. I'm saying the weight of it. Weighing and weight are two different things. How do you know what the weight is?
Yeah, how are you going to know what the weight is without weighing it?
The pressure.
Okay, wait quickly for me with pressure without containment. Because you have to have containment to have pressure.
No, you don't.
A barometer is containment.
No, it isn't.
A barometer uses containment.
The barometer is the measuring device. It's not the fluid that we're measuring the pressure of.
How does a barometer work? You're obviously talking about a mercury barometer, correct?
Well, it depends on which barometer you're talking about.
That's what you're obviously talking about a mercury barometer, correct?
Not necessarily. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Would you agree that any barometer has a surface wall to be able to measure its pressure?
So
there you go. Without a container, you cannot have gas pressure. You need surface walls.
The barometer is not containing the pressure being measured.
Exactly, against its surface wall.
You're not making sense.
You need containment to be able to measure your pressure. pressure cannot be exerted. It has to be exerted on a container wall. Otherwise, it won't have pressure.
Flats, are you saying that a one-sided object is a container?
Yes, it's an open
Yes.
container.
Yeah, that's weird.
Then
It would be a barrier
what a-
if you're
we're gonna have
talking
to
about
define
one
what a
layer
container
pressing
is,
against
because
another.
one side will not contain anything.
Are you
This
telling
is
me
going to be a hyper
It won't be-
argument.
open container?
Yeah,
It
and
won't
once
be a
again,
sealed container.
once again, you seem to be conflating the quality with the measurement of the quality. The pressure's still there, even if you don't have a surface to measure it with.
The point is, you guys claim you don't need containment to have gas pressure, and to measure your gas pressure.
No. Again, those are two different
That's the
things.
point.
Those are two different things.
No,
The
it's not.
pressure's there, even if
What's-
we're not measuring it.
Yes.
Well,
because
the thing is, gravity doesn't have any sides to contain anything. It actually asks the air to contain itself by pulling the air and asking the air to form a column that is effectively a barrier against the land. So,
Well,
I
that's a
mean, we're
surface,
talking
isn't
about
it?
one-sided
he just said-
containers, we're talking about no containers. What are we talking about?
He just said that one surface is a container. So the Earth is a container because it has one surface.
Yeah, I'm container too.
Okay, that I would agree. So you're saying it's open then. So then Earth is an open system.
Oh god.
Pretty much. I mean, yeah.
Okay, then why is all our gas not filling the available space?
Because we have a container.
Toward the land, but not toward the air. It's asking
Doesn't
the air to contain
matter.
itself, and
Doesn't
the air
matter. All
itself
we
is
need
not a
is
container.
container. No, this guy said all we need is container. So okay.
So, Shaiki, to have a container, you need something that stops the progress of something from going any further. The air doesn't do that. The air is a liquid that you can flow through that doesn't stop the progress of anything unless it's layered on top of something else.
Okay, can I
Air's
make
not going to contain itself.
quick let me try and explain something. Let's say you take a hose pipe. We'll say that hose pipe nozzle is the floor of your container floor, like Earth, and that's where the gas is coming from. The water, and you're spraying it out. Is that water gonna fall back into that nozzle, or is it going to disperse out? Now, if you don't
Well,
have
it depends on what else is around it, but the gases aren't being sprayed out of the ground.
Well, the moment you treat the air like a layered
I'm not talking to you,
medium,
Lemon. Let him respond.
But you saying the gases move in all directions, correct? All the time.
They have a bias towards one direction, but sure.
Bias.
Yeah, because of their weight.
How does it have a bias?
They have weight.
See,
That means that they're biased towards down.
Again, you can't prove that weight to be biased towards down. Just like I explained earlier with the
Yeah,
container.
I can. But back to the point that I was questioning you on. Why did you use that nozzle? Why did you use that nozzle example when the gases are not being sprayed out of the ground?
It was to show you if something's moving away from the ground, it has to be able to come back. If it's not got nothing to push it to come back, it's just going to carry on dispersing.
No, it has the same thing to push it back as the water does. But anyway, that's not a very good analogy.
If you got an infinite amount of volume and you got your gas moving in all directions, it's going to go from the point of origin, and it's going to go and travel and travel and travel until it finally finds something to bounce off of, correct?
Or it falls back down because it has a bias towards down because it has weight.
So you're telling me this concept of gravity is overcoming entropy and making something that moves in all directions to have a bias to one vector downwards?
I didn't say why it has weight. I just said it has weight.
I agree, everything has weight, but that doesn't mean it's going to come
that
down.
means it's falling.
It's got energy, it's got movement, it's moving all the time.
Sure. And that movement has a bias towards down.
Based on what?
Its weight.
But
you're just saying weight, but you haven't proven this weight. You haven't proven how you said this weight has bias down.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be proven. You've already admitted that everything has weight, so we can move on from that.
it needs to be proven because you're begging the question. You don't have a source for your force to show that it's generated from the source and coming out from the source to be a force.
I'm not talking about any
force. It may just be the structure of reality with no force that we can at least catalog to say what the hell is happening. Otherwise, you're making a philosophical declaration that everything is pulled down because of a force that you haven't identified, you haven't found the source. You're just making a philosophical declaration.
I'm not talking about the force invoked yet. Flats has already conceded that everything has weight, so we can move on from that.
So you have a circular
even helium, and
philosophy
why
with
does
no
helium
proof
still-
because you
Lemon?
can't
helium
know the
still goes
source
up
of your
even though it's got weight,
force.
correct?
Lemon, I'm not arguing with you. Let him
But look,
respond.
guys.
This will go on all day. You don't have a source for your force. Prove it.
We don't have to. Flats
Lemon-
conceded that everything has weight, so now we can
No.
move on.
Helium's got weight, but it still goes up, and that debunks what you just said. It's got a bias down because it's got weight. So
That's
if
because
it's got weight,
buoyancy.
why is it going up? No,
That's because of buoyancy.
Because the air around it is pushing it up because it's heavier than helium. So the heavier material will be down instead of the lighter material. But when you remove that heavier material, that's when the helium will go down because there's nothing
Great.
heavier below it.
Okay, cool. So what happens here if you
Making
look
the
down on
question.
Earth, take a container,
Lemon?
take two containers next to each other. The one has a low pressure, and the other one's got a high pressure, and you open a barrier between the two. The low pressure can be on top. What's going to happen? You got heavier gas on the bottom, and you got no pressure on the top. What happens when you open the barrier?
The pressures will equalize until that there is the same
Okay.
pressure gradient with
So
it. Let me
what happens to
finish.
your weight there?
Let me
What happens
finish.
to your weight there? No, wait.
What?
Let me
Hang on.
finish, and you might find out.
I'm still busy talking. I'm not even finished.
I was still busy responding.
What happens? I'm still.
He's
talking.
answering your
Let me
question,
finish.
Flats. He's answering your
What
question.
question?
Let me
Yes, you said-
finish. The pressures will equalize until there is the same pressure gradient in both of them. And that gradient is due to the weight of the gas. The top is pressing on the lower bits, which are pressing on the lower bits because of the weight. It's still there.
Again. You are claiming gravity has a bias towards down. It would not fill the space if you're claiming gravity to hold it down. Would gravity have a greater impact down, lower to the ground, or higher from the ground?
It'll have a greater impact closer to the ground, but that's beside the point.
Then
I don't
why
know where that came from.
Why can entropy overcome gravity lower on the ground, but up in the air it can't overcome
I
gravity?
don't know what you mean by entropy overcoming gravity. It's not a force.
Gravity is not a force, correct? So you wouldn't have
entropy
Gravity
is
a
not.
force. Entropy is not a force. Is that what
Entropy
you're
is not a
claiming?
force. I never said entropy is a force. No.
Well, how does it
Then
overcome
how does it-
gravity? What do you mean by
It's a
overcoming
measurement
gravity?
of disorder. Entropy is just a measure of order. But the thing
Then
is,
what do you
entropy
mean
would
by
increase
overcome
as the
gravity?
gas-
Clarify.
Because entropy would increase as the gas fills the available space. Just like your demonstration down
Okay.
on Earth, it overcomes gravity. Now you're
No.
stating that where it's stronger down, it can happen, but now in the sky, apparently, gravity is overcoming everything else.
I
Now it's
really
got a
don't
bias
know
up
what you're
there,
talking
down-
about. The gases have weight,
No, you're not.
therefore there's a gradient of pressure.
Look, the point is, if Earth was an open system, and we were floating around in space with a very, very low vacuum system, gravity would not be able to hold anything down, just like it wouldn't hold it down here right on Earth. Because if it
Why
wouldn't
do
be
you
able
say
to hold
that?
it down here, where it's stronger, why would it be able to hold it up there where it's not?
Why are you saying that? It
Well,
doesn't make any sense.
Wouldn't that lead credence to gravity because we find the most amount of material towards the surface of the Earth where gravity is strongest, and then we find a very low amount of material.
When I
higher?
asked him what creates the pressure gradient, he gave me the quantum eraser answer that it's a dynamic system and more of the gas is produced near the surface. This was his explanation for the pressure gradient.
Which
And
is,
then
is
and
it
then-
not? Is gas not created down at pressure at the bottom?
No,
Where
not
else
significantly, no.
Yeah,
And
I mean-
anyway,
If I give it,
it doesn't. Here's the bottom line, though. Here's the bottom.
Flatzoid, I've got a plastic trash can next to me. There's a pressure gradient into it. Is the bottom of that plastic trash can creating gas? It's empty, by the way. There's no decomposing matter.
Gas inside the plastic bag.
It's
Saying
empty.
it's at atmospheric pressure.
It's a
You're
gradient.
telling me it's got more than one side than the other.
Towards the bottom,
How do
there
you
will be
know
more
it's got
material.
Because I measured it.
Here's a
plastic bag is weight. The plastic bag is weight.
There's no bag. There's just an empty plastic container with a gradient.
Here would be a better example of that. Okay, we take that empty trash can. Imagine if we could seal it airtight, right? We seal it airtight at sea level, and then we bring it up to, we bring it up to the top of a mountain, and then we put a pressure gauge at the top of the container, and then a pressure gauge at the bottom of the container, a very sensitive one, okay? It's going to register more pressure at the bottom of the container, and then if we flip that container upside down, it will reorient itself, and then now the pressure gauge that was reading lower will read higher, and vice versa. Even though we flipped it, so it shows that pressure gradient is developing at the bottom of the container, regardless of where the pressure gradient was introduced. Regardless of how it was introduced, it doesn't matter. The pressure gradient will always read higher at the bottom of the container, will it not? You understand the experiment that I proposed?
Yes.
When you flip that container upside down, the pressure gradient will still produce, the pressure sensor closer to the ground will still read the higher pressure, even if we flip it upside down a million times.
You can try that, but can I tell you, have you ever taken a bag of potato chips up to a mountain?
Yes, the pressure will, the bag will inflate.
Okay, it's got equal right through. It's trying
What's
to
that?
escape all over, not on the bottom back of the chips.
Well, that's because there's more pressure in the bag than there is outside, so it's exerting. It's gonna try to.
Exactly, just like.
But there's still a pressure gradient in that bag. It doesn't matter that the pressure is. Yes, the pressure overall is higher in the bag.
How are you going to measure this? How do you know there's a pressure gradient in the bag if the bag's it's expanding?
You put a pressure gauge at the bottom of the bag and a pressure gauge at the top of the bag, and you read two different pressures.
Have you done this? Have you done this?
I haven't done it, but this is a known fact.
It's a principality. It's a principality.
I have done this. Not in a potato chip bag, but I did it in a sealed PVC pipe.
Yeah, Moyak did an experiment where he took a very sensitive barometer and he put it in a container.
This is not an argument. This is a sick, twisted game.
It's amazing how you.
So you have to explain to me.
It's amazing how you guys need.
You have to come up with a reason. And by the way, it's self-evident. Like I said before, for some reason, you're unable to grasp the fact that there has to be a pressure gradient in the container in order for you to be able to weigh the gas. Because if there's an equal amount of pressure at the top and the bottom, then the container would not change in weight.
I said would.
Also, why is that bag inflated?
How would it?
It's because it's going up.
How would a force? Hold on a second.
Sure.
How would a force be imparted on the walls of the container that would then transfer to the scale, to the load scale on the scale, if there was not an uneven pressure on one side of the container than the other? The only way that the gas can impart a force on the scale is if the molecules are hitting the walls of the container, and then the walls of the container are pushing against the load cell. That's the only way a weight is registered. So if it was pushing equally on all sides of the container would not weigh more because there would be just as many molecules trying to lift the container off the scale as they are pushing towards the bottom of the scale.
Jake?
Yes. Do you hear me?
The container is heavier than the helium or gas or whatever you put inside, correct? You'd say the container is heavier. There's more weight than the gas you're sticking into it now, correct?
It doesn't matter. We put the empty container on the scale and we zero out the scale, so the scale reads 0.
Do you think that gas has enough force to be able to lift that container off of the scale?
It doesn't have to lift the container. All it has to do is
you added
enough weight to add enough force to add weight to it. You hear that, Black? Got enough force to add weight to it.
You added substance into a closed container. You're adding weight. You added substance.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it sits at the top of the container, left of the container. It's still going to give the weight.
Right, but you have to. You see how it has to. The gas has to apply an unbalanced force, because if the force was perfectly balanced, then the container would not change in weight because the gas would be pushing on the roof as hard as it's pushing on the floor of the container.
How many times does this point have to be made?
And that's how we know, by the way, and then as Moyak's experiment demonstrated, we know this is a fact because we can measure a higher pressure at the bottom of the container than the top. And pressure, and what's gas pressure, right? It's force by the area, right? Force times area, right? pounds per square inch or kilograms per centimeter squared, right? So we know that the gas is pushing harder at the bottom than the top because we can measure that pressure, and there's more pressure at the bottom than the top. This is all absolutely self-evident and obvious. I don't understand how you don't see this.
Jake, and how would I be able to explain this to you? If gas is moving all over the whole time, that pressure when it pushes, are you saying it's staying on the bottom and pushing on the bottom, or is it just hitting it and pushing away?
If you plot out the probabilities of the impacts of every single molecule in that container, and you had like the left wall, the right wall, the top wall, the bottom wall of a let's say a box, a container shaped like a box, okay? And then we plot out the impacts of every molecule, there is going to be more impacts at the bottom of the container than on any other wall. So it's not moving uniformly. There are more impacts at the bottom, which is how they're able to increase the pressure, which is how they're able to transfer a force to the scale.
Jake, would you say that something moves faster when it's going down because it's denser? Correct?
I think we missed a few words.
Accelerates faster when it moves downwards, correct? Can you hear me? I'm saying when gas is moving all over and it's going down because it's denser than the medium in it, it's going to move easier downwards, correct?
Well, in my example, we're not talking about different mediums. We're just talking about a gas in an empty container. So it doesn't matter the gas. It could be helium or nitrogen or whatever you want.
Same medium. It takes less energy for something to go downwards, correct?
What are you talking about?
If gas is moving in all directions the whole time.
If you give it a force to something, it's going to take less energy for it to go down than
but it's
than
still
going
not
up.
a pressure gradient. It's just pushing more of a force downwards because it's easy.
Okay, so in your statement, when you're talking about gas pressure moving in all directions
it's still moving
evenly,
in every single direction. It is still hitting all the container walls.
okay, it's still hitting everything. That's fine. But let's do a simple math problem.
It just hits harder.
Am I not talking? Am I muted or?
You're fine. He's just being an ass.
Okay. So Flats, let's just do simple math.
Hello?
If gas inside of a container is moving in all directions equally, let's give it a numerical value. The gas moving downwards at 10 feet per second. That's your layman force. And then it's also moving upwards on the top part of the container at 10 meters per second. So now you have an equal force top and bottom. That's what you're claiming.
Wouldn't be
So
because
what? Go ahead. You're trying to correct me. Go ahead. What are you correcting me about?
No, I'm saying you'd have the same amount, but you're gonna have it's gonna push more pressure at the bottom because it takes less energy to go downwards.
Yeah, but why does it have that? Why is it easier going downwards?
I'm gonna try and explain.
No. You're trying to claim two things. One, you're trying to claim that it takes less energy to go downwards, and you're not explaining any type of mechanism. But you're also saying that it's pushing in all directions equally. You can't have both. You can't have both, Flats. You need to realize this. You can't have both statements that you're claiming.
Let's put it this way, Jake. If you add one molecule of gas into a vacuum, a perfect vacuum, now we're just saying, hypothetically, it's a perfect vacuum. You stick one molecule in there, and it's bouncing all around. Would you agree that it's going to go faster going down to the downwards than it's going up or sideways or whatever?
Yes, exactly. That's what we've been trying to tell you. That's why when you have a whole bunch of them, you get more pressure at the bottom.
Jake,
yeah, go ahead.
Do you understand now? Because it's denser, but it still has a uniform pressure. It's not more.
But you just didn't describe a uniform pressure. You just
just moves quicker. It moves easier. It moves easier to the bottom. That's all I'm saying.
And so you're saying that when we have this one molecule bouncing around in this container, you agree. Hold on a second. You agree that if we have this one molecule bouncing around in the container, you agree that it's going to be, if we were to measure its speed at any particular point where it's bouncing around the container, its velocity will be higher when it's going towards the floor of the container than when it's going to the sides, for example, right?
Stop being dishonest. You can't demonstrate any of these things you're postulating. You ain't telling them what particular gas.
Hold on, Brummy. Brummy, hold on.
No, but you need to stop because you're saying that it does this. What gas
because it doesn't really take energy, or because it's guys.
Did you agree with my example
Same
that
as
if we were
gas is
plotting if we're plotting this individual molecule of
Can I
gas?
finish answering?
Yeah, I just want you to address my
gas,
question.
What gas exactly? All gases behave differently. You're in a vacuum. You add some gas.
No,
to
they
it.
all behave
You
the
put
same.
a balloon of helium. If you put a balloon of helium in a vacuum and then it goes to the bottom because the air's been taken out, then you pop the helium balloon. The helium is going to fill the container in all directions. It's not going to go to the
into
bottom.
a gradient of pressure.
It's going to fill. It's going to go.
Remy, he already disagrees with you. Let him address the topic instead of you. We've heard your version.
You lot are confusing him. You're confusing him. I'm trying to make sure he understands.
Because he's talking out of both sides of his mouth?
No, because you lot are twisting what he's saying. He's trying to tell you that it would go on all walls of the container. So without the container of the vacuum, it's going to fill the vacuum, isn't it? So it would fill out into space. Gravity wouldn't pull it down in the first place. It's hitting all sides. That's what he's telling you. You guys.
Remy, he's a big boy. He can argue by himself.
We never said it doesn't hit all the sides.
Well,
it will hit all the sides, but there will be a pressure gradient because more of the material will be towards the bottom and less of the material will be towards the top. But it's still moving in all directions.
That's why I don't agree with you. But that's
Well, I think if we simplify it down to one individual molecule, though, it's going to hit all the walls as it bounces around. But if we look at its velocity before any particular impact, the velocity will be higher when it's going towards the bottom than when it's moving towards the top or the sides, which is why it exerts more force on the bottom of the container, which is why you're able to weigh it. Oh, so you agree?
Exactly.
You agree, right?
So if there's more force at the bottom flat, how can it be moving in all directions?
How can it be the same pressure?
It's just it has less energy.
Pressure is the force exerted by the molecules on the walls of the container. You just contradicted yourself.
That's not pressure gradient.
Two of you just asked him a question.
That's not pressure gradient.
What do you mean? You just agreed that.
Stop talking, Jake. Jake, you've answered the question. Let him explain.
Guys, but that's not your pressure gradient. Your pressure gradient is stating that it's going to stay down there. It's going to be staying denser down at the bottom than it isn't, which is not true. It's just going to be hitting the container wall at the bottom with more force before it gets hit up again.
Right, which means there's more pressure. We're not saying the gas is staying in one place. We're saying that there's more force imparted at the bottom of the container.
It hasn't got a downward. It doesn't have a downward bias then. It hasn't got a downward bias then.
You just said there is.
Density and not gravity.
You just said because there's more impacts
No,
at the bottom. There's faster impacts at the bottom. If there's faster impacts, that means there's more inertia transfer, which means that there's more force.
Can I say something? As long as that gas does not turn into a liquid, it will press equally in all directions inside that container. The only way you will get any differential in the tank is when the gas turns to liquid. That's it only. Other than that, it'll be equal pressure in all directions. Thank you.
I've got a question as well.
Dallas,
so let's say
this is
equals
what
out.
you're
Hold
trying
on. Let me
Dallas,
help
this
you.
is what we're trying to say. They can pick up more pressure.
Flatzoid, 1 point. Let's say it is a gradient. Yeah. Let's give them the gradient. Now, what happens if I open the top of that container? Hold on. Don't talk.
I'm
trying to ask a question here.
We're not giving them shit. There is no gradient in a goddamn container.
Yes, there is.
Let's
disagree with each other. Just one at a time.
Flatzoid, let's assume there is a gradient. Now, let's open the lid of that container. What will happen to the gas in that vacuum container? They're saying there's a gradient inside the vacuum chamber. So let's open the vacuum chamber. What will happen? The gas will rush out the top as well, won't it? It won't sit in the bottom. The gravity won't hold it down. Gas won't be going down. Exactly.
No.
So it's an open system. So you guys have to understand that space is also constantly expanding. Why is the severity and negative torque? And why not getting even more of a vacuum? Why isn't that expanding? Why isn't that number changing? Because you're a fucking lying piece of shit. That's why.
Solid.
But you see, that's what
solid
I was trying to
evidence.
explain
You're
to
lying
you.
piece of shit. That's pretty good.
You see, that's
So what happens when you open? What happens when you open a vacuum, mate? What happens when you open it? Will the gas stick there? Will the gas? Yes or no? Answer the question. Answer the question.
Yes or no?
What, in a vacuum?
Yeah. Look at them.
If it's a vacuum, you're going to get the air outside the vacuum to fill that space.
So
and then you'll still have a.
Will the gas sit in the bottom of the container, or will it escape the container?
Okay.
What? No, it won't escape the container because it's not. The high pressure will move to the low pressure, and low pressure is the vacuum. So the air outside will rush into the vacuum and then form a gradient pressure.
Okay. So what's above us? A vacuum, right? Above us is a vacuum.
Would you?
Above us is a gradient that keeps going.
So above us is a vacuum, right? So
above us is a gradient that keeps going.
No, it isn't. We are contained, you stupid idiot. Because if it wasn't, the gas would rush up.
Well, I thought you were trying to talk about our model and argue against.
Yeah, we're talking about a gradient.
Let's get it right.
Your open container in a.
Yeah, we're talking about a gradient pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a gradient pressure inside of a container. Then we open the container. The gas will rush out of the container.
Yeah, they said
bigger gradient
inside of an open container.
If there's a vacuum above your container, the gas entry will increase. The gas will seek to fill that available space. Simple as that. Get it in your head.
You just get a bigger gradient.
Yeah, reason.
Right. Yeah. So
reason. This is what I was trying to explain to them. Reason. This is what I was trying to explain to them with demonstration, and they just don't seem to understand that point.
Here, then give the demonstration. You said there's a demonstration.
Okay.
Go ahead. Show us that gas has equal pressure and equal forces in all directions equally, despite being able to weigh it
That's
downwards.
not what's been said, you idiot. That's not what's been said.
Okay.
No, that's what Flat said. He made two different statements. He said that you're going to have more force towards the bottom. Hold on, let me say what it is, and let's see if Flat agrees or not. Flat, you made two statements, and this is my interpretation of what you said, and you can disagree. You made two statements. One being that the gas inside of a container is going to exert more force towards the bottom. That's the first statement. And then the second statement you said is that gas inside of a container will move in all directions with equal force all the time. Do you agree that you said or believe those two statements? Or if not, correct me.
Gas moves in all directions at the same. It just has more velocity when it hits the container at the bottom. It's still in all directions at the same.
At the same what?
You understand? Showing you gas pressure would be the same in all.
Well, you say the same, but with the same what?
Posted a video.
No, hold on. You said the same.
The same movement.
The same what?
The
same movement.
Net
So would you
pressure
say
is going to be the same. If it's
defines my measurement.
You need to specify what you're saying when you say the
velocity is
same
just-
something.
in a net force, it's going to be the same. If
Oh.
you take a net force or something, are you telling me you're only taking a section of that net force?
If you're saying that there's a net force of 0 because it's all the same, then you will have you will not have an increased velocity going downwards because it has to be equal in all directions. And then if you have an increased velocity downwards and you have a deviation of velocity, meaning you're going to have a deviation of forces. You're going to have more force downwards. So how can it be an equal force all around?
Because it's hitting the same container.
Right,
the
but
whole container is linked.
Okay, yes, I agree, and they're all going to hit.
together.
They're going to hit the walls, yes,
You
but with
telling
different
me-
forces, with different amounts of material hitting it.
Only the bottom's going to be hitting with a bit more force because it has less energy.
Dr. Phil says,
But
if
it
you had
doesn't make a
a
pressure
100-mile
gradient, though.
container,
And when you
Yeah.
open,
Please, what does
and when
Brummy
you
think about this?
open the container, it disperses.
this is what he says. If you had a 100-mile
Big
container
Brownie
with 14
right now,
if you had a 100-mile
before this
container
goes
with
off.
14 psi at the bottom, and the gas would not escape if you had a vacuum at the top. But that's because you've got a container. What if you never had a container and you had a vacuum above it? What do you think would happen then?
No, what he's
Without
saying
a
is that it's an
container-
open container. It's an open container because the top of it's
It's
a
a
vacuum
container,
it's connected
though, you
to this
stupid-
container.
Listen to,
No,
listen
but
to
it's
the words
open,
you're
right?
using. You're using no, but it's not open.
You just said it's connected to a vacuum. It's an open system to a
All the-
vacuum.
It's a container. You've got the central.
I could even put a
force
soda
acting
straw
upon-
up in that
Let me
situation.
finish.
It wouldn't
Can I
suck the
finish a
atmosphere
sentence?
out.
Can I finish a sentence? You do not live in a container. You live on an open surface inside of a gigantic vacuum or absence of molecules. Then molecules.
No, we don't live in that.
increase.
The vacuum
Okay.
still has
You don't-
material
you
in it.
don't- So you live? Do you live in a container then? Do you live in a container with an open top?
Not a physical
You live in an
barrier container.
You do, okay. Now you're starting to get it. So when the Earth spins, right?
I don't think you
the
understood what I
centrifugal
said.
forces- do the centrifugal forces act upon these gas molecules as it moves
It's
in the atmosphere?
metaphysical.
You don't even understand you're a model. It's ridiculous. You don't live in a container.
A
you
way
live-
that you guys use. We use the same methods that you use to say that it's mostly going down on the scale. You looked at the activity. Did you put a scale toward the top of that column to see how much that column weighed? No, you didn't. You just philosophically assumed that since it's not
what do you
going
think is
up,
going to happen?
the force of down is not balanced and it's going mostly in the downward direction without measurement. Well, we look at gases and see that it disperses in all directions without coalescing into a ball mass and makes similar philosophical conclusions. So whose philosophical conclusions are more consistent? Seeing glass and outward in all directions and assuming that it does so in the container, or seeing it go in all directions and assuming it only goes downward inside of the container. Is he going to tell me the first conclusion that is more consistent?
We never said it only goes downwards.
The trailer. Lizzie pipes in with, well, I think you might be able to borrow one of Justin's friend's trailers. So we drive over there and say, okay, and Timmy's already arranged to pick up the couch. So the van it's a little flaky on starts. I had to do some work to try and get the van.
Is he hot micing or is he making a point? He's talking about a van. Moyak, are you hot micing?
Get there. The trailer doesn't have any lights.
Ah, was it dark?
Of course.
Normally just ask the person if they're hot micing. Hey, are you hot micing?
Moyak, you're hot micing.
See my
Moyak.
demonstration?
Yes, you do.
I'll do the best I can do. I'm going to go and do it.
Non-existent mods, please mute Moyak. Thank you.
So Jake, guys, did you see my demonstration you guys asked for?
Oh,
To the mods that don't do their job while we're savaged. Thank you.
Savaged.
So,
Yes.
So did you guys see my demonstration? Guys, did you see the demonstration you asked for?
We'll see how.
I saw that there's
Put
a
it in the
video.
chat.
What specifically are we looking
Yeah.
at?
You can go then you can actually see me demonstrating what would happen if you had to open your closed system. And even while it's closed, you can see the gas.
The whole arm of the held
it's
by a piece of wood
it's
that thick
the same in the whole container.
And so if you break
How
that,
did you verify that there weren't any tiny pressure differences between the top and the bottom?
All right, so these are recliners.
Yeah, can someone mute Moyak? Moyak, he's hot
wasn't
micing,
about
please.
the pressure
It's very annoying. Can someone please mute Moyak?
No, I mean, here's the day. Sorry to get into the conversation as much as I have Flatzoid. I just wanted to point out these guys. They're only wanting to argue points that suit their agenda. Now let's give them the fucking gradient. So fucking what? When you open that container, the gas would never be a fucking gradient. It would go off. Yeah. So
I know these are big claims without
what I'm
evidence.
saying.
You're right.
But that's what I'm saying, right?
So Flat, what are you explaining in this video that you provided? Is that just showing?
A demonstration where
make sure
gravity
you
is
get them.
supposed to be the greatest. Gravity, guys, on Earth, where I do the demonstration, and if I open the container, it disperses. Now you're telling me up high above with altitude, where gravity is weaker than it is here, it holds it down.
Exactly.
Against demonstration.
And they forget about the fact that the Earth's spinning as well, constantly giving these molecules constant energy to keep moving. They also forget about the sun exciting these particles. They also forget all the external energy that's going in, and then they go, "Oh yeah, gravity is so weak and negligible." But for some reason, it just it starts to pull it down as it goes higher and higher. Like it gets stronger as it gets higher. It's ridiculous.
Did anyone ever say it gets stronger when it gets higher? Did anyone ever say that? No. So if you don't understand our model, don't speak for our model. How about that?
They say it goes weaker. But realistically, what you're really saying is it's working as a container, going against all these other forces that energy going into. You don't understand what I'm saying because you're a fucking thick idiot. That's why you don't understand what I'm saying.
Who's that? Who are you talking to?
You guys are contradicting.
When's the last time I insulted you, Brummy? When's the last time I insulted you, Brummy?
You just insulted me now. You said I don't understand. You just insulted me by saying I don't understand your model.
Right, and then you call me a fucking idiot.
That's an
Is that
insult.
equal?
Yeah.
Is that equal? If I point out that you don't understand something, and then you insult me like that, is that equal?
You're wrong. You're wrong.
We've always been kind of cool, Brummy, so I don't know why you're getting so emotional right now. Stop spiraling. Go get your tampon. Go relax.
Yeah, well, here we go. Just go.
Let's get you some cranberry juice, some Ben and Jerry's.
Move
Why don't you
along
relax?
yeah, we go. Move along the conversation because you were scared to do a 1v1 yesterday. You didn't want it. You just come in and just postulate your.
It's not scared. If you want a 1v1, I need to prepare and I need to know what we're talking about.
You don't need to. I don't need to prepare. I know my stuff off by heart, bro. I know everything that I know.
No, I know. It's easy when you make things up and you talk about it. I know.
Oh, it's easy when you have to read things off the internet and pretend that you know what they're
No,
saying.
that I learn things so I can properly explain them. Yeah,
No,
that's
you
what
ain't
kind of
learn them
You're
because
right.
you ain't learn them. So you explain to me why the molecules that are in motion should all of a sudden stop going in motion. Will you explain to me?
It's
how
not that they
gravity-
stop going in motion, that they lose energy
Oh.
as they go upwards and they gain energy coming
Okay.
down. What's wrong with that?
So
As
you
they
think
go
they-
up, they
you-
lose
you
energy,
think escape-
and then
you
as they
think-
come down, they gain energy.
So you think the escape velocity then? You think these molecules need enough energy to reach escape velocity? That's what you believe, yeah?
No, yeah, that's what happens. It requires it requires the energy for escape velocity. Not many make it. Some do, some don't. Well, most don't, obviously.
So mass is so the gravitational pull is proportionate to the size of the mass, right, or the molecule itself, and that is the molecule of gas is so small and so there's no effect. Even whatever you do, actually at the surface level where gravity.
No. The big mass. The big mass. The big mass. The big mass, not the small mass. The big one.
Bidor. This is why I can't debate you in this forum because there's too many goons. Do you understand? I will rip you in half on 24/7. You know it. That's why you didn't want to debate me yesterday.
No, it's because I wasn't prepared about a particular topic.
I don't need to be. I can do this every single day.
I know, because you can make it up. I know.
Not making nothing up. This is the rhetoric of thermodynamics. This is what they.
Remy, I think you got a little confused though. It's the force that's proportional, such that the acceleration is always the same.
Doesn't matter. There's no effect on these molecules. There is no effect. Gas is free to go in all directions.
There is the same effect as on anything.
Molecules are accelerating towards the ground at 9.8 meters
let me know
per
when you want
second
to
squared.
get your information, Bidor, and come and debate me whenever you're ready. I'm not going to debate you in a room full of people and they're going to heckle me.
No, just give me a topic, give me a date. Give me a topic and a date. That's it.
Tonight we'll debate this topic.
No. Why don't you guys just do it now?
Gas pressure valve container.
Well, why can't you guys debate now?
Because you lot just keep jumping in. You can't fucking shut your mouth and you keep fucking making the conversation impossible to have. That's
an open forum.
One thing you need to do, Bernie.
Exactly why I don't do it. That's why I don't debate in here. That's why I don't want to debate. So continue talking with Flatzoid.
You need to quit equivocating gas pressure.
But you literally took over the conversation from me. There were two other people talking. You took over. Now you're saying
I don't want to talk
like
anymore.
debating.
Talk to Flatzoid. Talk to Flatzoid. Don't talk to me.
But he was talking to Flatzoid, and then you took over the convo.
I don't want to. I'm just trying to make a point. You guys are you're forcing him to talk about his gradient, and I'm just trying to help him out. Even with the gradient, you're doing a container.
So you did what you say. You won't debate here because this reason, because people jump in, right?
Reasons they just obfuscate the whole time. So
it is what it is. The main thing is we see the gas go in all directions, so it's logical to assume it's going in all directions inside the container
let's set a
too.
date though. Rummy and Biojo
they can't demonstrate
tonight.
Yeah, they can't demonstrate what they say, but we can demonstrate what we say. It's funny how that happens.
Yeah, but let's
Exactly,
set up a
metaphysics.
debate.
And so we need to see what this metaphysics is grounded in. Basically, your religion is grounded in the metaphysics of the past with the Kabbalion. So we have to read the Kabbalion to even see what you're trying to say.
Can you
You're basically
demonstrate
saying
this?
that things that are more energy go up into the higher etheric realms and go up, and stuff that is denser, grosser matter tends to fall down and go away from the etheric realms downward. That's the philosophical assumption you're starting with. Can you show that gravity is actually forming stuff into this force that you're philosophically talking about? No, it's just philosophical assumption. So let's compare philosophies. It's that simple.
Could we argue with one version of flat Earth instead of three of them?
Yeah, we're trying to organize a
That's
debate here.
your
Rummy and Biojo.
metaphysics.
Skip your
That's your
meds,
metaphysics.
Like a pallet shooter.
So unless you have a scale that's on the other walls of that container, you can't just, beg the question and say it's going downward when the only way that you're measuring it.
You can, Lemon. You can put scale there.
Begging the question. Measure the force on the size of the container, the explosive pressure. Maybe then we can talk.
It has been measured, Lemon.
By what?
It's strange how they think. It's strange how they think tension is, and the unit of which we give a measurement is now saying it's pressure that's pushing down. I mean,
Can I ask Flatzoid a
just the tension
question?
on a spring, or whatever. I mean, what's it designed to do? It's designed just to pick up a pressure from the top, pushing down on that tension of that spring or whatever it's pushing on.
So
You have to
Flatzoid,
do it
question for you.
the same as hanging a fish. Same as hanging a fish. If it's pulling down, it's designed to be that way. That's why it picks it up like that.
Flatzoid.
Yeah,
Flatzoid,
well.
question for you.
Yeah.
Is it? Can you imagine that we can have a container that has a vacuum in it?
Breaking.
Can you imagine a container with a vacuum in it?
Yeah, your vacuum has to
What
be
does that
contained.
mean to you
We
when
want
it's a vacuum? What does that mean?
Are you talking about a perfect vacuum or just a very low system?
A perfect vacuum. What would a perfect vacuum mean?
That means we have nothing inside. It'll be a void.
And so you have no atoms of anything, right?
Nothing. It's void. Correct?
Yeah, okay. So it has no atoms. Right?
Hypothetical. It's a hypothetical place that doesn't.
Okay, fine.
can't
Hypothetical. Sure.
All your shit's hypothetical. You don't have anything rock solid. All you got is these mind games.
Jeremy?
Okay, no, it's fine. We understand. Okay, hypothetical.
Okay.
Gone.
So let's say it's a fairly large container. I mean, we can't do a too large a container, right? Because it would collapse upon itself with the vacuum and all the pressure. But let's say it's a large container, and you introduced one atom of any gas into this container. What do you think that atom would start to do?
I'll probably just go to the bottom because it's the densest thing in the container. There's nothing to be less dense, also it can't really move anywhere.
So you think that atom would just sit in the bottom of that container?
No.
It'll move.
Admittedly, we can't see this, right?
It's always going to move around though because it's got energy.
Okay, but do you have any idea in your head what that motion would look like?
I said it would go down faster because it's got no friction going downwards.
Okay, so if we could map the motion of this atom, what would that map look like? What would that motion look like?
Randomly in all directions.
Down, hit the bottom, then it will go down on the side, hit there, it just goes randomly.
But would it go in a straight line from side to side, up, down, or would it have a parabolic arc like every other thing?
Obviously,
They're saying it's going to be biased towards down.
It's not hitting into any other gases or anything to go down. It's like playing. Remember pinball? Have you ever played pinball?
Yeah, no, but I'm talking about let's talk about this model.
Does that?
Okay,
Yeah,
let's walk this through.
It's the same motion.
So it hits the floor.
It's the same motion.
Okay, so this atom hits the floor.
Again.
What does it do?
It bounces into whatever direction it goes to.
And does it keep going in that direction infinitely till it hits something else?
Yes, because there would be no friction.
And it's okay. So would you say it bounces off the floor, and let's say it just happens to bounce straight up, vertical, straight up. Do you think this thing goes straight up until it hits the top?
It would, yes, because it's elastic.
And do you think it doesn't? Okay. And so when it bounces off the floor, it has a velocity at that point, right? We'll call it x. We'll say so it leaves the floor at velocity x. When it hits the ceiling of this thing, does it still have velocity x?
Obviously not. Like I said, it's got less friction to go down.
Okay, no, hold on. So it took off and it bounced off.
Energy for something that's denser, something that's look. You're trying to say gravity, and I'm trying to tell you it's just because it's denser than nothing around it. Correct? Where's
I'm not trying to say anything. I'm asking you what you see. I'm asking you what your model is.
Look, it's accelerating downwards, so it has to be gravity, which is it's not true. It's just
Wait,
denser than
okay,
nothing
hold
around
on.
it. So it has no friction.
Do you agree that it accelerates downwards? Do you agree that it loses velocity as it goes up?
I've said this the whole time.
Okay, so this individual gas molecule. Who's live miking?
Sorry, that me. Sorry, it's me. Sorry.
Very loud.
Okay, so this individual gas molecule, all by itself, acting all alone, it hits the floor, it bounces up, and it starts decelerating immediately, right?
Yeah, to a certain point.
And at 9 point, so that just work with me here.
Because it let energy when it hit the floor.
Okay, but then it has its own velocity, right? And it has its own little momentum. It's tiny. It has a little bit of momentum, but it decelerates at 9.8 meters per second squared, right?
No, that I disagree with.
Why?
Because that has never been proven to decelerate from 9.82 square meters per second. Have you ever taken one molecule in a perfect vacuum and seen this?
No, of course not. You know I haven't. I know I haven't.
Yeah.
But this is where
it loses some of its energy. Remember, just because it loses some of its energy once it's hit the floor doesn't mean it's going to all of a sudden run out of energy not to hit the top again. Point is, it's hitting everywhere. It only hits the bottom with a bit more of a force because it accelerates easier because it's denser than nothing around it. There's no medium for it to give friction to go down.
But wait, there's nothing around.
It seeks equilibrium.
Wait.
Equilibrium point down.
Did you hear? Wait. Hold on a second. This isn't a vacuum. It's the only
equilibrium of dense object is always.
It's the only molecule in this place. There's no equilibrium, right? There's no denser or less. Everything around it is void.
One molecule.
One molecule won't be able to seek equilibrium then? Is that what you're saying?
With what?
I don't know. I'm asking you what you're saying.
One molecule, what's the equilibrium?
I'm telling you exactly what I'm saying. Equilibrium of a denser object is always down to the bottom where it has surface tension to support it. So the container would be the supporting tension at the bottom. But because the molecule has energy, it's not going to sit there. It's just going to hit against there and go up again. And then it comes down again with more force because it's got no friction.
So you're saying the bottom of this container is. So you're saying the bottom of this container is somehow magically attracting this single molecule.
That's exactly what he's saying.
No, the bottom of the container is the bottom of the container. The surface wall.
So what's attracting this thing down?
Nothing. The molecule.
So why is it moving
denser
down?
than the nothing. Because there's nothing to keep it up. There's no structural support to keep it up. It's in nothing. It's not in the fluid or anything.
I agree. So what's
There's
pulling
no
it
medium
down?
to keep it up in. Why would it be up? Nothing's.
Why
pulling
is
it down.
Why is there an up?
Like if you take a brick and stack another brick on top, because it's got energy to move up. Gas moves.
But we're talking a single molecule in a vacuum.
Single molecule that's moving.
How does that molecule know which way is up?
It doesn't know which way. It's just moving wherever it's hitting from. If it hits the side, it goes to this. It doesn't matter. It's all random.
Okay, so back to the other thing. See, here's our model. Our model says that single molecule inside that large vacuum chamber would bounce around like a ball.
Pulling it down.
Yes, and yes, and what we say, and what we say is that as soon as it bounces off the floor, it immediately experiences a deceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared. And if it has enough initial velocity to reach the top of that container, it will hit it, but at a lesser velocity than it left. And if it doesn't have enough energy to reach the top of that, it will form a parabolic arc, just like every other thing that's ever left the ground in gravity. And it'll be and that molecule will be bouncing around like a ball. And we can predict those parabolic arcs because it's an ideal situation, right? It's an absolute vacuum, single molecule. It will have a very, very constant bounce. Do you not agree with that?
No, because you're basing it on a belief of something pulling it down.
Well, okay,
pulling down anyway. It literally.
But it is.
But look what I'm saying. If you take a brick and place it on the floor.
I don't care about bricks.
What's happening? Why isn't the brick falling further
That's a
down?
diversion.
No,
I don't care.
Why is the brick not falling further?
Yeah, this is how you guys do things.
Why is the brick not falling further down? Scott, I'm trying to explain my point. Why I'm saying it's not gravity pulling it down. Why is the brick not falling further from the ground? It's on the ground. Why is it not falling? Because it's structured.
But this is just your brain trying to avoid the inevitable.
But the problem is we also have
the brick and I throw it. Wait,
no, because you're struggling right now with this concept of the molecule in a vacuum chamber, and your brain's saying scramble. Yeah, that's what's happening right now.
But the problem
There's
is
alarms
we
going
also
off in
have.
your head right now. Woo! Run away, run away, run away. And that's why you need to move with the brick.
But the thing is, you're implying that the only
I know
forces
you
are
think
pulling
you do.
forces, and that's inaccurate because even science now everything, even science now says everything vibrates in place.
Now, where does it
So
stop?
Women, you're interrupting.
just really quickly,
Lem,
current science
Scott,
says
now pick up
everything.
that brick that was.
We don't care, Lemon. Current science says that gravity exists, so you can.
That's great. Everything vibrates in place. So if something gets out of the way of something else can vibrate into place to fill the space, whether it goes up, down, left, or right. So you're implying that the only forces are pulling forces, Mr. Mackey, and that's inaccurate. There are also vibrational forces vibrate in all directions. So your paradigm is off, Mr. Mackey.
Thank you, Lemon. You didn't imply that, but thank you.
See, that right there that right there was Lemon's brain going crazy.
Yeah.
Mr. Mackey, everything vibrates.
Try
So all you need to do to fill the space is stuff out of space. Something will vibrate into place to fill that space. That's called pressure mediation.
Lemon, please stop interrupting. Come on.
Okay.
But Mr. Mackey prefers to just psychoanalyze the crap out of people rather than dealing with the facts.
Yeah, that's what
And I
was
don't
doing
like
on
it when he tries to mind.
Lemon.
Oh.
Why don't you
Poor
fucking
Lemon.
live journal about it or send him a DM?
Okay. Lemon, can me and Scott just finish?
Wait.
Ooh, that's a nice
This is why I don't
picture.
like about, this is what I don't like about being fucking muted. You look around and you're unmuted all of a sudden, and then you wonder, did I do some bullshit while I was fucking unmuted? I shouldn't have done.
But look, I've got a joke for everybody. I've got a joke for everybody. Let's have a look, right here. I've got a picture.
So you know
of the
what?
Black Swan, right?
If you
Hold on,
mods
have a look at
wanna
this. Brad,
fucking
you'll
mute
love this.
someone,
Brad,
give us
you'll
a
love this.
heads up before you unmute us.
I'm
Because
not
otherwise,
coming
we're
over and
gonna
taking
be
over
fucking
conversations.
left. We're gonna be fucking
Brad.
left,
All right, you
mic free, without fucking knowing.
Hey, Veach, can't you just mute both of them?
Branch, give you a rest, right? Have a look at this. This is the Black Swan. Proof of the flat Earth. Look at this for a picture.
Hey, Rummy, will you let them finish, please?
Yeah, I'm finished. That's all I wanted to show. Just that picture of the Black Swan. That's
Okay.
Oh, that's funny.
All right, so you were saying, Flat.
So Scott, okay. So Scott, you'd agree the floor would be structural support for the brick.
Sure, why not? But I don't know why we moved to a
for that
brick.
molecule.
I thought we had a perfectly good analogy, a perfectly good situation we were talking about that we never resolved.
Just to show you its structural support. Okay, it doesn't even have to be a brick. It can be your hand. It's just something that gives structural support to the object you're observing. So the molecule is still moving. Now, when it hits the floor, it can't go further than the floor. That gives it structural support. It's seeking equilibrium.
We already agreed with that.
Because it's denser. Because it's denser than the nothing medium around it. It's going to accelerate down, obviously, because it's seeking equilibrium. So it's going to have more energy to go down.
Well, that's the
takes
issue,
more
Flat.
Well,
You're
hold
not
on,
explaining
hold
the
on.
direction.
Yes. Let's go back to the single molecule in a vacuum chamber. What is down for that molecule? It's a simple question. What determines down for that molecule?
I told you, the density.
The molecule is also denser. The molecule is also denser than the area above it. So why is it not accelerating upwards? It's denser than the area above it. So why is it not accelerating above? Because it's less dense than the area above it.
Because there's no structural support. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The structural support is down. It seeks equilibrium.
There's also a ceiling.
Where its
down.
equilibrium would be down.
In this container, there's structural
Would it
support
not
in
be?
all
Would its
directions.
equilibrium not be at the bottom? Because it's denser. If you
You should be embarrassed of yourself. The way you're trying to spin this argument to avoid gravity, you should just be embarrassed right now. I would be so embarrassed if I were you.
Again,
are you telling
They have no
Are
shame.
you telling me
No shame.
that denser objects go up? That's telling me.
No. What you're
Guys
saying,
telling me-
hold on.
Guys,
What you're saying is that because
Are you guys
it's
telling me
going
that
down
denser
because the area below it is less dense. That's what you're saying. Is that the molecule is more dense than the area below it. That's fine. I accept that. But you need to explain why it doesn't go up because the area above it is also less dense.
That's Yeah, there's no relationship here right now. We have a molecule in a vacuum. There is no denser, right? There,
Now-
you agree with me? There is no denser, right?
Yes, there is a denser.
Why does
Is
it
denser.
From
need
what?
support?
What
Why does
creates
it
the
need
denser?
support?
It's denser than the air around it. So obviously it's going to
What
take
is
more
no,
energy
no,
to
there's
go
In every
up.
direction.
air around
Go
it.
Because
There's
look,
no
if you're
air
gonna put
around
it's
it.
a-
It's a
Exactly,
vacuum.
so
There's
it's
no air
denser.
around it.
Exactly. So it's denser than nothing. It's denser than nothing
Okay.
around it. So it's
Okay.
going to go where? To
There's
its
nothing
equilibrium.
above it.
Down.
There's nothing above
Where-
it. Why does
Thing to
go to
What is
nothing
the
above it?
equilibrium?
There's nothing to compare to.
Why equilibrium?
That's what I'm trying to explain the brick. The brick's equilibrium is denser, so it would sit on the floor because it's the densest object in the container, correct?
The area
So,
that it's moving to
what-
is
what's-
denser than the area above it, though. That's the issue. If it was not gravity, there was no pulling down, and it was only about density.
The issue
When you
is
have a
that
brick
you guys are
in
trying
the
to push
air,
gravity on
the
something
air
which is
below
not-
it is denser than the air above it.
Yes.
So it would be easier for the brick to go upwards because it would take less
No, it's
energy and it's moving through less material by going upwards. But we see it go
brick
downwards.
is denser than the air.
The air above it as
So the
well.
brick is
Yeah.
denser than the air.
Is it
Oh,
denser
you're letting
than
them out of this
Flatzoid?
thing,
You
man.
saying
Don't play
the
that
brick should go
game.
up. How
Is
can
it
a brick go
denser
up
than
if it's
Flatzoid?
denser?
That's what you need to
No,
find out.
I'm taking the role of what you're saying. I'm not making this claim as a factual claim or what I believe in. What I'm saying is in the words that you're using are that the brick or the molecule that we're using is denser than the area around it. Sure, it is denser than the area
Yes.
around it in all directions. So why is it picking
So
or
that-
choosing or always going down? That's the question.
Because it's denser. Denser
But it's
sits
also
equilibrium
denser.
downward.
It's also denser than the
If
area
you-
above it. So why
it's-
is it not going upwards?
Can I finish talking? It's the same if you've got, let's say, water and you've got a less denser, like an air balloon. It's going to go up. Why? Because it's less dense. If it's more dense, it's going to
Because
go
of
down.
gravity is what we'll say. So we'll ask sans gravity. Sans gravity, why down?
Not because of gravity, because it's
Sans
got
gravity,
no
why
structural
down?
support to push it upwards.
Why down
It's got
without
no
gravity?
structural support to push it up.
That's true in all directions.
Density doesn't need gravity.
That's true in all directions.
Why
Do you understand what I'm saying?
This guy's
You
just
understand the
replaced the
question
word
I'm asking
gravity
you?
with
All right, you understand the
structural
question that's
support.
being asked of you. Everyone's
Guys,
asking you.
really.
Everyone,
I mean, if
everyone
you
is
take-
asking. Do you understand the question being asked? Everyone's asking the same question, except for Mackie, who's getting frustrated because he's gotten a little bit usurped. But the question everyone's asking is, with gravity, we have a sensible reason why things go down, why denser things go down, why it sorts out downwards. Without gravity, there's no real reason for you to bias downward.
Yes,
Brick is
there
in a vacuum.
Because
If
it's
it's
got
brick-
no structural support to push it upwards.
It has no structural push
Everything
it
has to
downward
be-
either, though. It has nothing in any direction. It's all the same for it.
The brick is in the middle of the vacuum chamber. The density and pressure are equal above and below the brick. They're the
You
same
guys
in
are
both.
trying to say just it's not. If something's denser, extremists. If something is dense
Denser is what? It's a vacuum in both directions, up and
at
down.
the bottom, because that dense object will try and be.
You get to
was
the
that-
bottom in the first place. It was started in the
What
middle.
you're saying is things go magically down, is what you're saying. Magically,
it's going
things
to go
down.
down. When it
Because
goes
of gravity.
down, oh no, not magically. It's density. Not magically. It's
Again,
density.
there's no reason why
It's
it should go
heavier than
down,
nothing
or to
around
left
it,
or
so
right
it's
or
going
up.
down.
You're literally just invoking. You're literally
Yes,
just
it has-
invoking.
it
You're literally
has-
just.
Density is mass per
It has-
unit volume. It doesn't have anything to do with directionality.
You're literally just invoking this sort of conclusion, this sort of assumption that you're making, which is that for whatever reason, you don't seem to have a reason, density goes down.
Instead of density, just say mass per unit volume. For some reason, mass per unit volume has a preference of direction.
Okay, let's do something else then. How about fill that container up full of water and then put in something that's less dense? And what's going to happen? Why is it going up? Why is it going up?
Scenario that fits your
No, why is it
narrative.
going up?
When the
Because of
current
gravity.
situation
Because
doesn't
of
fit your
gravity.
narrative, you throw it out.
But
You
the
understand? Now
gravity
it's got structural
the
support.
gravity affecting the water is pulling the water down below the balloon. So the balloon appears like it is floating,
up, but
but
it
what's
doesn't have
happening is the
structural support
water
to
is
push it
filling
down.
the space where the balloon is. So the water is coming down, and then as an effect, the balloon will go
Structural
up.
support.
being pushed by the water up.
Structural
That's
support.
what's happening because of
Yeah,
gravity.
structural support is
Structural
fighting
support.
gravity. Without gravity, there's no need for any of that.
This guy
But
is just
it doesn't make any
replacing
sense.
gravity with
You
structural
understand?
support.
Okay, guys, can I finish now? You see, that's why I say it's got structural support. There's a medium to actually get it to push it up. Now there's no medium to
That's
be able to
gravity. We
push
call
it
it
up.
gravity.
And without that pressure gradient, the water wouldn't push in below the
Gravity.
balloon.
There's no gravity. It's just there's nothing to support it to push
Without
it
a
up.
force,
That's why it takes more energy.
without a
That's why it
force,
takes
there's
more
no reason to
energy
go
to up
down.
than to go down.
Look, things go in the direction
why
the
it takes
forces
more
apply
energy.
to them, right? Like, things, if you apply force
That's
up,
what
it's going
takes
to go up. If you apply force down, it'll go down. Without gravity force,
why it takes more
there's
energy
no
to go
reason why a
down.
floating molecule in the middle of a vacuum
What
is going to go
gravity?
Can I just finish?
Gravity isn't
Can I
even a
just finish what
force.
I'm saying? Hey, can I just finish what I'm saying? Without a gravity force, there's no reason for anything to move in a downward direction because things move in the direction in which forces are applied on them. And so without that force, you're basically just postulating that force without saying that force.
So gas doesn't have its own force. Gas doesn't move in all directions all the time.
It doesn't have its own force.
Yeah, if it has a force applied to it, it'll move in a direction. When it hits a wall, that's a kinetic force pushing it off in a different direction.
Which is proving my point. Why it's going up and why it's going to the side. Why it's going down.
Because it's bouncing off of
It's
things.
exerting a force to push it.
Not by
Thank
itself.
you
It
for
had a
proving my
force that
point.
knocked it into. It had a force that knocked it into motion. Then it hit a wall, which is a new force. It's going to push it in a different direction. So on and so forth.
Show me gas that doesn't have its own force. That's not moving on its own.
You have to find something in zero G. I mean, sorry, zero. What do you call it?
Absolute zero.
Absolute zero. Thank you. Absolute zero.
Temperature.
You don't get absolute zero. You don't get absolute
You're gonna have to
zero.
find absolute zero to find your gas molecule that has nothing. There's no motion in it.
You do not get absolute zero.
So then you're not gonna have a hard time finding such a molecule.
You're asking for it then.
Flat, I'd like to postulate something. So let's take that vacuum container again, and let's take one molecule, and we place it directly in the center, and we remove all forces, or not all forces, we remove all energy from it. It's just a molecule, not moving. It's stationary within the middle, very middle.
But gas then.
Now we invoke
Yes.
reality and what we experience on that container. What's going to happen to that molecule? It's the density in all directions is equal, because it's zero in all directions until any wall of the container. Which direction will it go?
What? Because it's denser than the nothing around it, it will go down.
But why is it
Structural
100% of the
support.
time? Why is it 100% of the time down when all support structures are equally distant away and all directions are equally equal density?
No, what support structures? You
That's what I'm
actually
saying.
need
What
something
support
to
structure?
move something up. You actually need something to move something up, don't you? To hold something up.
In
If you're holding
reality,
something
yeah. I'm
over
trying to figure
nothing,
out what your interpretation
This
is.
is reality. This is reality. If you're holding something up above nothing, it's not going to stay there or move up or anything. It's going to go down because it's denser. There's
It
nothing
is going to go, but
support it.
what I'm
There's
saying
nothing
is,
to hold it up.
sure. What
doesn't
you're
it just
saying
go
is,
up?
You so badly want this to
what?
be gravity.
No.
You so
Stop.
badly want
What
this
you
to be
are saying,
Why doesn't it
what
just
you're
take a
saying,
left?
it's going down because of density. And what I'm trying to say is,
Yeah.
if it is density, the density above that material is also less dense. So why isn't it going in that
Yes.
direction?
No
If you're
structural
saying
support. There's no structural support.
it's the same structural support in a container
got no
to the
structural
bottom
support.
as there is to the top. It's the same structural support, the same material, same distance away, and you
There's
have the
no
same
structural
density in all
support, that's the
directions.
point.
Yeah, let's imagine a sphere. Imagine that the container is just a sphere that's held by a. Imagine that this container is just a sphere that's held by a string in some auditorium or something. How is there more structural support in one direction than the other of this sphere?
It's so simple. I mean, it's like taking sand and throwing a golf ball on the sand. The sand is holding it up. Take the sand away, what's going to happen? It's got no structural support to hold it up.
We're talking
You're
about
saying because
an individual
Hold it up
molecule
against it.
flying
You wanted
around
it
in
to
this
go up.
sphere.
If you wanted it to go up, then you would have to make it less dense than the nothing around it. But there's nothing around it, so it can't be less
Okay,
dense.
that's a great example. That's a great example. The golf ball on sand. Okay, now the sand below it. Do you think that it's more or less dense than the air above the golf ball? Which one is less dense? The golf ball sits on
golf ball or
sand.
the air?
So now we're looking at the density
Yeah.
of the sand and the air. Which one is more dense?
It's less dense. The air is less
The air is
dense.
less dense. So why is the golf ball not moving into that less dense area?
Why is it not going up?
Because the ball is more denser than the gas. How stupid answer is that?
Yeah, exactly. So if the golf ball is more dense in the air, why is it not moving into the less dense area?
Because it's denser than the gas on top of
Exactly.
it.
But you said it's just about density. You said it's just about density. If it's because of density, the golf ball is more dense than the air above it. So why isn't it moving that way? Crazy.
Because the gas is less dense. The gas will push above.
See, now it works both ways for you.
I think the problem everybody's got here is you're claiming a vector or a direction without establishing why it goes in that direction specifically. See, we say gravity because it gives us our vector. You say density, which isn't a force or even a pseudo force.
It has no vector.
It has no vector. So we're trying to understand how you're getting your directionality from your model, from your explanation. What's the cause for an object to move? We need energy. We need a force to interact with it.
Yeah, this isn't new. Like you're just taking density and repurposing the definition to suit some weird narrative that you're making. Everyone knows what density is. Everyone knows what buoyancy is. It's a well-defined term in science.
And buoyancy requires gravity as part of the equation.
Did you know even blackbirds, some blackbirds can work out the density, or excuse me, water displacement problem?
I've seen those experiments where they pour the container to get the food out of to make the food float up to the top.
Yeah, they drop more rocks in there to make the water level rise so that the floating food gets closer to them. Yeah, even blackbirds
they
can
know
figure
which
this
ones
out.
are hollow, the worst water can pass through, so they know that they can displace more water with the things that are solid.
Wow.
That's right. Even baby birds can do this, guys. Come on.
The molecule depends on the density, and you're in a vacuum chamber. If there's no forces at all, and the vacuum chamber moves left or right, up or down, then the molecule will hit a particular wall in the opposite direction of the acceleration. It has no effect on the molecule, doesn't determine that. That's determined by the direction of acceleration. So there's no relationship between density or anything else.
Well, we
Except
have
for the
pressure
elasticity
mediation.
of the actual molecule itself, right?
We have other possibilities. Pressure mediation is a possibility since everything's vibrating in place. All you need to do is take the stuff out of the way and something will vibrate in place up, down, left, right to fill the space. So we have other possibilities anyway.
But we don't have any evidence for them. We've got evidence for gravity, so we'll stick with that, thanks.
We don't have evidence for gravity. It's just philosophically assumed. You have no gravitron. You have nothing to point to as a source of the force.
I don't need a cause. I don't need a cause to have evidence for gravity. What we observe,
but at that point,
we observe an acceleration towards the Earth. That is what we have labeled as gravity. It has a vector, and we apply that to multiple things. We've then learned that has a relationship to the mass of the object, and we've applied that. That's all we've done. We've observed stuff falling. That's gravity. And I don't know
you
why
observe it and you apply a philosophical definition to it that is not justified because it's
well, would it be better if we just called it acceleration with a vector?
Man, we know about gravitrons too. I get on it every time I go down to the state fair. It's a lot of fun.
Well, the thing is, first in reality, so at this point, it's just an empty metaphysic, and we can replace your metaphysics with something else and still have the same explanation without anything that you're referring to actually being there and fully verified.
You can when you present the evidence. How about that?
Where's your gravitron? Doesn't exist. We have electricity and we have vibration, but
you don't
where's
get
your gravitron?
What you can do is interpret what we present as evidence. You can interpret that, but you don't get to dictate what we present as evidence.
All you're pointing to is an activity, and many things can participate in the same activity without there being a gravitron or whatever the hell you're trying to philosophically.
What we're saying is phenomena exist.
Call it gravity doesn't
reminds me of
exist.
a
It's
t-shirt
actually
I made.
electricity and vibrations, and have it published, and then people will take you seriously.
It just bugs me because this is just a semantic argument, Lemon, where, when you get down to it, we don't know the cause of a lot of things. That's cool. That's part of what we're discovering. But we stick labels on stuff, and the label that we stick on shit falling to the Earth, the acceleration, we call it gravity. It's an observation and it's empirical. And that's what we've labeled it.
The only thing that's empirical is you watching the activity. Many things can participate in the same activity, and you can still have the same explanation.
And
That's
we
not
can still label it
satisfactory.
gravity, Lemon. And we could
Guys,
still
you know how
label it
buckwheat-
gravity. We might change what the cause of it is, but it's still going to have the fucking label gravity. I will guarantee you that.
Yeah, me too. Honestly, Lemon. But have you guys ever thought of
I smoke a spliff, so I'm going to be a much nicer person in about 10 minutes. Apologies.
I'm already smoking with you. I got a great idea for a t-shirt. You put a picture of buckwheat, and then in the letters it says, "How's my dictate?"
Dictate and buckwheat? Flied over my head.
How's my dictate?
Dictate. With an
What's
S,
my
maybe.
dictate like? Come on, buckwheat. The way he says this shit.
Well,
He's saying, "How's my dictate?" How's my dictate?
Dictate. I guess a dictate would be like an order, maybe. Yeah.
No, it was funny, Grim. It was just
No,
not
it's
like
bad. He's got bad grammar. He's got bad. He speaks properly. His dictation is all wrong. So how's my dictate?
it's
joke
funny,
out of
but
it.
I don't think I'll repeat it to anyone.
All right.
I think you should repeat it 2 or 3 more times so we all get the joke.